You know what I say? Time to ban them. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time, and today we reflect on a recent tragedy, and some of the more tragic responses. I didn't think I'd be returning to this topic as soon as I am. I thought I'd cover the most reasoned and contentious arguments for and against gun control in a fairly recent video, and to be honest, I did, which is why I'm not addressing that today. However, there is increasing pressure on certain individuals to concede and bring in some restrictions, and that is understandable. Now the response has been a mix, where some have considered such changes and others have expressed why they feel those changes would be detrimental to public safety or why they might be ineffective. A few have considered deflecting the issue completely onto something rather unrelated, this being gaming. What was the incident in particular that caught my eye then? Well, it was this little blighter of a piece, or a statement even, by Matt Bevin, who in response to the recent shooting decided that one of the most dangerous influences on children's feeble, impressionable minds were the presence of video games. Appearing on a local TV station, he states that there are violent video games listed for adults, but children can play them. The sin. And then points out that there are video games that reward players for killing other players, and that these games are being forced down our throats under the damned notion of free speech, and that apparently they have desensitized people to the value of human life and so much of the strong morals that we need in the land of the free. There are many flaws to his statements, and I could address them all, but most of his flaws are fairly self-explanatory. But it has been an age-old belief that somehow violent video games inspire real-life violence on a regular basis. Criminology has shown the relationship as complex. There have been individual instances where people have attempted to mimic certain actions shown in video games with tragic results. However, those examples are generally overrepresented in modern media, as they are rather exceptional. Then we talk about the general notion of violence, and this is where a huge logical misinterpretation has occurred for a while, and one that needed to be corrected. Many studies found that after a gaming session, children would be prone to higher aggression, and therefore certain politicians began to push this anti-video games narrative. What people have confused here were two things. Firstly, that short-term stimulation was not indicative of a long-term response. Children were more likely to be stimulated after coming off a video game, but that doesn't imply that their behavior would alter outside of the medium, or even that it would influence their levels of aggression as fully developed adults, and the studies into that have been very mixed and inconclusive, with many actually finding no correlation whatsoever. The second mistake they didn't recognize was that violence-inspired simulation and violence-inspired mimicry are two very different concepts. Anything can stimulate us to be in the mood to do something, whereas only specific scenarios could be put down to video game-inspired predicaments. And of course, in the instances outside video game-inspired mimicry, which there are very few examples of that I've just spoken about, if we want to talk about stimulation, there are many other influences at that point. Comparatively, there are a lot more mass shootings in America. There are many facilitators to creating that environment. What do I mean by that? Well, every tragedy is the result of a probabilistic outcome. I know it sounds inhumane, but it is true. So many conditions go into creating a scenario where a mass shooting can occur. Now, what we have to do is outline the current factor that is making it disproportionately high in the US and working out how to reduce it. Now, I'm not going to discuss that today. As I said, I've discussed that in the past. However, by looking at the scenario and concluding that video games are the main factor contributing to the high mass shooting rate in the US is delusional. Why is that? Well, there are many reasons. Firstly, because video games have a medium that can be measured internationally in countries with different laws and henceforth different conditions. Now, if we went over to the UK, South Korea, or many other countries where video games are popular, we'd notice that even a similar level of game ownership does not create a similar outcome, even if there are different genres, for example. Now, what we have done there is disproved a sole cause situation, but we haven't directly disproved a first cause situation. What do I mean by that? Well, if I was to present that argument, someone may say, yes, the gun laws definitely create an increased likelihood for shooting than other countries with tighter laws. However, if children had better influences growing up, then they'd be more responsible with guns. And in a way, that is what the Kentucky governor was trying to hint at. But this is the problem. If there is a lapse in another area, I do not think it is video games. I feel there are many societal problems games within the US that could influence children. But if we are to take the probabilistic formula that we mentioned earlier, we'd notice that even nationally, a lot of children play video games not suitable for their age range. There is an extremely negligible relationship, maybe none at all, between that and mass shootings. Blaming video games is completely irrational. And yes, this argument could be applied to other aspects of antisocial behavior. But once again, I believe that even if an action was supposedly inspired by a video game, to then imply that somehow they have had a decisive influence is unfounded. Media does have its influences. It's unavoidable, as I said in a previous video, but you have to understand that there are other influences, particularly in preventing shootings, that could be taken of note before. I think that video games are just a cog in a very complex contraption, and to somehow try to control it would have very little effect whatsoever. And then on top of that, my question to the Kentucky governor, even if this was all completely true, how do you control it? Someone's house is their private sphere. You can't go around looking through people's windows and working out what games their children are playing. You can promote a certain attitude, but that has been eroded away for a long time. Not through video games alone, it can be witnessed everywhere in society. Unfortunately, it is the century we live in. For most school shooters, for most terrorists, for most individuals who cause exceptional grief within societies, it's a very long chain of events that predated the existence of video games within their lives. And that's something that Matt Bevin needs to grasp. I believe some people have biological ability to cause excessive pain, whereas others don't. But for those who do, it's a long chain of prerequisites from there that are needed to activate such an insanity. For Cruz, the activation likely started when he was orphaned. Most psychologists agree the first 2 years are a critical time in a child's life, and with no real parental connection within that, what started was a long chain of events. Does this mean we shouldn't discuss certain situational factors that we can change? No, we can definitely start a discussion in how to prevent someone like him from ever ending up in that situation. But to focus on the trivial matters like video games is focusing on something so sketchy that it almost seems like Mr. Bevin wanted to change the discussion from what should be spoken about. And regardless of what you think, it's a chat worth having. And these distraction techniques are just going to hold up that important discourse, but it will never prevent it. It's pointless stalling, it's a risky game he's playing. I've covered this before, but America is in a unique situation that needs new, unique discussions to be held. Video games are not unique, and I don't think the circumstance, even within that context, makes them unique either. It's time to drop the bullshit and get to the point. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think America's biggest problem that it needs to navigate? As long as it's not video games, then I would love to hear down below. Until then, however, I'm The Right Opinion, and I'll see you in the next one.